Hello and welcome everyone for joining in for today's monthly webinar with RoomKeyPMS. We are taking a look at group blocks. So to get us started for today, let's go ahead and jump right into our topic. So the overview for today's webinar, we're going to go through a couple of introductions at the beginning, then we'll dive right into our topic for today. We'll define what are group blocks, why are group blocks used, why are group blocks distributed, and then we'll jump into our hands-on demonstration. We'll look at how to create group blocks. We've got a couple of different types of group blocks that can be created in RoomKey. Then we'll talk about when you can start using this module, and we'll wrap it all up with a summary and Q&A. So for our introductions today, my name is Tasha Leclerc, and I am a trainer and implementation specialist with RoomKeyPMS. Prior to working with RoomKey in 2015, I did have about 10 years experience working in hotels. Joined with me today, I also have our Director of Customer Experience, Mr. William Tam. He'll be overseeing the chat and monitoring any Q&A questions throughout today's presentation. William has been working with RoomKey since 2014, and prior to that, he has about 10 years of experience working in hotels and hospitality. So as I mentioned, William will be overseeing the chat. I'll be leading today's presentation. So if you do have any questions as we go through today's presentation, feel free to enter those into the Q&A icon on the Zoom webinar meeting. William will be able to answer those, and anything that we're not able to answer during our presentation, we'll hold back and answer those at the end as well. So a couple of key things about today's webinar: it is being recorded. You might have seen that pop-up notification at the beginning of today's meeting. We will also be handing out a webinar survey after our webinar presentation today. We do appreciate any feedback from participants joining in today's live webinar. And lastly, I just want to make a quick plug for our next webinar. Next month, we'll be going over the mobile check-in and checkout opportunities that are available with RoomKeyPMS, mobile check-in and checkout. Great. So let's jump right into defining what are group blocks. So group blocks are guest rooms that can be held for an agreed upon rate. They are often held for a series of time. Oh, and I'm just seeing here that some of the information is not showing up on screen. Okay, I'm just going to continue with a little bit of a definition here. We might have to go back to one of our previous slides here. There we go. So to just talk a little bit about what group blocks are, as I mentioned, they are guest room inventory, so inventory from the hotel that is held aside for a set amount of time for a specific group or event. So these rooms are not actually booked, but they are taken out of your general inventory and held aside for the booking of specific group members or specific type of group attendees. Some of the main features with that include that you may have a negotiated or discounted rate available for those rooms to be booked by the group guests. You may also choose how you want to arrange your billing for those group guests. So as we'll see when we go through our demonstration, RoomKey will allow you to accommodate a variety of billing methods. The next thing that we just wanted to touch on is why are group blocks used? They are a great way to sell a volume of your inventory guaranteed for a specific time. So it's a great way to increase your revenue, especially whenever you might be in a location that has an opportunity to sell out to different groups or events. If you have maybe some events going on in the local community, it's a great way to hold aside some of that some of that inventory in anticipation for selling out to attendees for that event or that occasion happening in the local community as well. Today, we will see a couple of different types of group events as an example, as part of our demonstration as well. Now, just to answer our question here about where are group blocks distributed, if you've been attending some of our other webinar training sessions, we do talk about the different distribution channels that RoomKey has. And for the purposes of group blocks, we can actually distribute group blocks. Of course, they can be made, reservations can be made by a guest contacting the hotel directly. But for those of you that use our eRes booking engine, we can also distribute group block inventory and rates to the eRes booking engine. And of course, we'll see that as part of today's demonstration as well. So because we're having a little bit of difficulty with this presentation today, I want to make the most of everyone's time, and I'm actually just going to open up our RoomKeyPMS database and jump right into the demonstration component of today's webinar. So I'm just going to open up RoomKey on screen here, and we've got a couple of groups and a couple of demonstrations that we can show inside RoomKey. So RoomKey, the tool that RoomKey uses to create and manage group blocks is found in the operations menu, and it is called groups. It's usually the second or third from the top there. So when you open up the groups module, it is a module pop-up that just appears on screen. So you can still see the information behind the screen that's going on in RoomKey itself. But here in the group module, sometimes called the group master, this will display a list of all of your active and upcoming groups. So you would see the group name listed in the first column. Each group is going to have a unique group ID. If there are any specific types of billing with a city account, that will also be noted next to the group. And then you've got some key pieces of information like the group arrival, departure information, and if there's any cutoff days. So this group master is going to show you your existing groups, and then along the right-hand side, you have some quick action buttons that you can use to create or manage these groups in the group master itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we're going to create a wedding group, a brand new group arriving next month for a wedding. For this group, we're going to use the first example of billing, which will be individual billing, meaning that the group guests, the guests who are booking the inventory and staying at the hotel, they will be responsible for paying their own room and tax charges. So I'll select new in the top right-hand corner, and that's going to open up a group wizard module on screen. There we go. So the group wizard module is going to show me a series of numbered steps along the top, starting with the primary step, number 1. You'll notice that steps 2 through 8 remain grayed out for the first part while you complete primary step number 1. Within this primary step, I do need to enter in general information about the group. I will also need to enter in any contact and billing info. And if I have a travel agent associated with this account, I can also do that travel agent attachment, but that one is optional. So I'll get started with my general information here. We'll create the Smith-Jones wedding. So you'll just type in the name of the group. If you already have a naming method that you like to use, you can retain that as well. I do need to also define a group ID. So if I do just the initials of this group and maybe the year, that will give me a unique ID for this group. If I have another Smith-Jones wedding next year, I would be able to simply swap out the group ID for 2023. So a couple of tips there that can help you create unique group IDs. You'll notice that RoomKey will actually block you or prevent you from creating duplicate group IDs in this fashion. The next thing that I have already defined for me are the client type and room charge codes here. Now, depending on your database setup, you may have different client types available. For this database, there is just one group client type, but you may have other group client types like a group social or a group corporate client types. Any of those client types that are defined with a group function will be available to select from this drop-down menu. So what this allows us to do is predefine that any guests that are part of this group block will have a client type defined as group in this case. The other thing that's preset for me is the room charge code. This automatically defaults to charge room and tax, but if you have a group that qualifies for tax exempt status or some other form of tax or partial tax exempt, you can click this and choose another option for your room charge code. But again, I'm going to keep the default option there to charge room and tax for all of these guest reservations. Now, of course, the next thing that I would do is define the arrival and departure date for the group itself. So I'm going to have this group arriving next month in July on July 16th, just for the one night there. Now, you can also create a custom checkout time if you're offering a late checkout for the group guests. You can enter that into the checkout time. Otherwise, it will default automatically to your property's default checkout time. Now, based off of these dates of arrival and departure, if you offer your group guests, in this case, wedding guests, the option to arrive before or stay later after the group or after the event itself, you can allow guests to arrive and depart outside of the block. And you can even define how many days you'd like to allot for them. So I might just add 1 day before and 1 day after. So if guests are traveling from overseas, they might want to arrive 1 day early, stay a couple of extra days, and depart after the event. Of course, this is going to be an active group, so I want to make sure that that active checkbox is also marked. Along the right-hand side, I'm able to define some features of how the group block is managed, whether or not I'm going to use any cutoff days. With a wedding event or any major events, you might have cutoff days that start around 30. That means that any rooms that are not picked up or reserved from the block itself 30 days before this arrival date, those rooms will be released back to the general inventory. Of course, we will see how you can still book rooms that are released back to the general inventory if the rooms are still physically available. But in those cases, the guests themselves would be in competition with the general public for that room inventory or for those guest rooms. So because we have an arrival date coming up next month, I'm just going to set my cutoff days for 14 days here. So guests must book at least 2 weeks in advance of the event, the wedding event itself, in order to guarantee their room and their rate. Below the cutoff days is the cutoff type. We have whole block and 1 day cutoff type. Whole block is the default setting, which means if you had multiple nights reserved, so 2 or more nights, that all of the rooms are released subject to this cutoff day. If you choose the other option, the 1 day cutoff type, it means that the rooms will be released for the first night, but the second or third, etc. nights will be held for the next day. So I don't see that used very often with group group contracts, but that does happen from time to time. You just need to make sure you're communicating that a rolling cycle of cutoff days if you have multiple days and writing that into your contract with the group. So I'm just going to keep it as the default, that whole block setting. In this case, because I only have 1 night for the group block, that may not actually have an effect there. With the block type, we have two options. You can choose a solid or transparent block type for RoomKey. With a solid block type, it's going to guarantee both the rate that we negotiate for this group, and it's also going to guarantee the rooms are held aside, subject to the cutoff days. If you choose a transparent block type, it will still guarantee the rate, but the rooms will not be taken out of inventory for the group itself. So the group guests would still be in competition with the general public for that room inventory if the block type is set to transparent. Sometimes I'll see a transparent block type used for an event where you are not certain how many people are going to be attending or reserving rooms. So you might do that for a convention that might be a local convention nearby. You might have a transparent block type, or perhaps for corporate events where they're not certain how many people would be actually attending the event itself. So again, for this group, because we want to guarantee both the rates and the room inventory for this group, I'm going to select the solid block type. Now, the last two fields are pretty straightforward. They are the similar fields that we would see anytime you're making a reservation in RoomKey, and that's the ability to define the source of business. This, of course, is going to be a group block, but you may have your own custom options here for source of business. The attached note, this note will be attached to each and every reservation that's part of this group block. So it is a good rule of thumb to put any booking and billing instructions into this attached note. We can see an example of an attached note in the background here on RoomKey, where it appears as a reservation note attached to the actual group reservation itself. So because this is a wedding group where the guests are booking their own reservations and paying for their own room and tax, I'm going to say guest book own and pay own. You'll see that RoomKey does have the ability to work with a rooming list, or you can do a combination of individual booking as well as rooming list entry. So we'll see how that can also be completed with RoomKey as well. So I've completed the general information for this group. I also want to make sure I'm entering in contact and billing info. Now, because I've entered in the note here stating that the guests themselves are paying for their own room and tax charges, I'll also set that up with the billing info here on the next tab. So the first thing that I'm going to define at the top of this contact and billing info is where the room and tax charges are to be posted when the guests are in-house. So because the guests are paying for their own room and tax charges, this drop-down menu, I'm going to select Folio 1. Folio 1 indicates that the guest inside the room that's checked or registered to the room is paying for their own room and tax charges. What we'll see in the next couple of demonstrations as well is that the other option that you can choose is Folio 8. Folio 8 is used for room and tax charges that are being paid by some other method other than the guest checked in. So that could be direct billing to a city ledger account, or it could be group billing on a house account or posting master account. But let's stick to the folio number 1. And I don't need to complete any other information regarding billing at the top, but I will need to complete the lower half of the screen where I indicate contact information for a contact person on behalf of the group. So since this is the Smith-Jones wedding, I might just put in contact information for the bride or groom. I'll just enter in some basic address information using a zip code as well, and then the contact information here. So Jessica Smith is the contact person, and you can also enter in a telephone number as well. Now the remaining fields, email, fax, tag attachment and sales manager, those are optional. If you have those applicable for your business, you can complete the remaining fields as well, but the address, contact, and phone number are required. So I can now select post, and that's now going to allow me access to the remaining steps in the group wizard. So I now have access to steps 2 through 8. I also have the ability to set up routing and deposit. Because the guests are paying for their own room and tax charges, I do not need to use the routing and deposit tab. And in this case, the guests, I'm working directly with the bride in this case, so I do not need to attach a travel agent either. I can go directly to my next step, step number 2, to define the rates for this group. Here on the rates tab, this is an amalgamation of both our new rate wizard and our old rates module. So on the rates tab itself, I do have a shortcut to the rate wizard if I needed to create a brand new rate for this group. But what I actually have available to use is a group default rate that's already available from this drop-down menu. If you don't see a group default rate available, you can click the Rate Wizard button, and that's going to open up the Rate Wizard module for you. And you can select, or you can create a new rate plan for group rates or wedding group rates, however you'd like to define that one. This database is set up with a single group rate. Just scroll down here. And the defining feature of this group rate, whenever I click on the edit button, is that it has a group client type attached. So here on the client types tab, I would be able to see that there is a group or group tour client type attached to the hotel direct distribution channel and the hotel website distribution channel. If you'd like more information about how to create rates, attach client types, and use the rate wizard, we did have a previous webinar session earlier this year. That is also available to view our previous webinars on our support website. So because I already have this defined or set up in the rate wizard, I can simply select my group rate from my drop-down menu here. When you select the group rate, you select post, and that's now going to attach that group rate to this group itself. Now, the group rate, as I've set it up in the rate wizard, is equal to the best available or bar rate. Now, what I can do is, using this group rate plan, I can actually override the attached rate prices. That allows me to customize this rate for this specific group without having to create a whole new rate plan in the rate wizard. So I'm going to click Override Attached Rates, and that's going to give me a pop-up screen here to allow me to define when the rate is available, what the rate price is, and I can also view what the rates are currently set to. You'll notice that this pop-up does allow me to customize the rate for both the pre-arrival and post-departure days. So if I want to give a negotiated rate, even if the guests are booking one day before or staying one day after the event, I can do that as well. If you only want to give the negotiated rate for a single day or for just the group block itself, you can remove the pre-arrival and post-departure days, those checkboxes there, and only change the rate for the main group block. Now, also below the dates themselves, this is a rate grid. This is very similar to what you would encounter whenever you're creating and managing rates in the rate wizard. This rate grid is going to show me all of my room types on the left-hand side, and it shows the incremental increases for those room types. The way that this is set up, it makes it very easy for me to define my base rate in the top row here. I'm going to have a base rate of 150. So I can enter 150 into the base rate row along the top. And what that does is now distribute that 150 rate, but also add in the incremental increases for each room type. So the SQQ room type is the lowest price room type out of 150. And you'll see that the SK room type now jumps up to 160 because it's $10 more than the base rate of the SQQ room type. And that increases all the way down. Now, of course, if there are some room types that I don't want to make available for this group block, such as these PH or Peyton House room types, I can just remove the check marks from those room types, and they will not, their rates will not change. I do not need to add them to the block. So I can simply select Save. This will now update the rates, and I can view those overrides in the lower half of this pop-up screen. So here I can see what the rates are now set as. If a guest was to book the SQQ room type, if they arrive one day before, they have to pay the higher best available rate, which is $175. Then they can pay the lower negotiated rate of $150 on the actual day of the event. And then the rate does go or does return to the prevailing rate. And in this case, it does just happen to be $150 on the Sunday as well. So if you don't want to make those changes, if this is not the correct settings for how you want to price your rooms and availability for the group, you can select Remove Overrides. That will just remove those settings there and revert back to whatever they were set up as before. Great. So I'm just going to put that override back in. This time I'm just going to do, let's say 145 instead of 150 and select Save. Great. So once you have played around with this override tool and you are satisfied with the pricing that is distributed down below, you can simply close this window and that will revert back to our group wizard. We've been able to successfully attach the group rate and use the override tool to customize that price for this group. The lower half of the screen, if you are using our old rates module, this was the previous method that was used to attach rates, but all RoomKey clients are encouraged to continue using the rate wizard. So define the rate or your rates in the rate wizard and attach them using this group default rate setting. So I'm going to jump over to our next step, the block step. This is the last of the required steps in order to complete the block for this group. Here on the block step, it's going to display a grid of the room types as well as the dates defined for this group. So along the left-hand side, I can see all of my room types listed vertically in the left column. Next to that tells me the total rooms in that inventory and the average rate across the entire stay if the guest was to book both the pre and post-departure days. Now, after those first three columns there, we have columns that are grouped by date. So we can see the pre-arrival date of July 15th, the actual group block, July 16th, and then the post-departure date, July 17th. Within each of these within each of these dates, we see individual columns. So INV stands for inventory. This tells me how many rooms I have available in inventory for that specific day. You'll notice that these inventory numbers will may differ from the total column here. And that just indicates that there's already some rooms that are booked out or reserved for those particular days. So that's why this inventory list says 7 instead of the total available, which is 9. Next to the inventory column is the BLK or block column. This is where we will actually enter in our block our rooms for this group. Once rooms are placed into the block, and once I have made a reservation from that block, that will be considered pickup or PUP, that will be represented in this PUP column or pickup column. So as reservations are made for this group block, we'll see the pickup column numbers update automatically. And then of course, REM will tell us how many rooms are remaining in the block after the pickup. Now, next to that, it will just give us a rate reference for that particular day. So here, once again, I can see that the prevailing rate for the 15th and the 17th are set as the best available rate, whereas the night of the 16th, that is the rate that we negotiated or used the rate override on the previous step. So for this group, I'm not going to hold any rooms on Friday and Sunday. I'm only going to place rooms on hold or in the block for the night of the 16th. I'm going to hold a total of 10 rooms. So in order to do that, I need to select Edit Mode in the bottom left corner. So this little checkbox here, this is now going to allow me to add rooms to the block itself. So I'll take 5 rooms, and we'll also take another 5 rooms here. So once you enter in the numbers into the BLK column, you would select Post in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, as soon as you select Post, that is now going to take those rooms out of the general inventory and hold them aside for this group. I can see that my inventory number for the 16th has now changed. So I can see that the inventory is brought down to 4 because 5 rooms have been placed in the block. And likewise, the other room type DQQ has been brought down to 1 because there's a total of 5 rooms in the block itself. So that's all you need to do in order to update your block or change the inventory or hold rooms aside for the group itself. You can repeat that process to manage the block numbers at any time. So I've got 10 rooms here, but if I want to take another room, maybe this EKS or Executive Suite, again, I would select the Edit Mode, place a number 1 into the EKS. We'll take out one of those rooms and select Post. That once again updates my inventory there. As you're going along, at any time you need to see your total rooms, your total count, it appears at the bottom of the screen here. So I can see that I now have a total of 11 rooms in this group block. So we've actually completed the group block itself. We've been able to update the group information. We've attached a specific rate. We've even customized the rate for the group. And now we've added rooms to the block itself. Now, before I continue with the remaining steps, I just wanted to show you how the affecting the group block itself will appear for your general inventory. So I'm just going to close out of the group wizard and close the group module completely. I'm going to access the inventory calendar for RoomKey. That can be found in Operations, Inventory Calendar, or you can hit F12 on your keyboard. So the group that we just created was for a future date. So I'm just going to jump to a specific date here in the future for our inventory calendar. So you just jumped ahead. We can now see the inventory starting with July 12th. Now the date of our group block is July 16th. So here in July 16th, I can see those inventory numbers, but these inventory numbers only reflect the general inventory available for guests other than the group guests. At the bottom of this inventory calendar, I can see if there's any rooms that are being held for a block. And in this case, this block is going to this block term is going to refer to both group blocks and wholesaler blocks. At any time, if you'd like to know more information about what is happening with your inventory, from this inventory calendar, I can see inventory detail for the specific day. I'm going to click on the date header. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Saturday, July 16th. And this is now going to open up my inventory detail. This is going to tell me exactly where my room inventory is being occupied or maybe blocked. If I had any reservations already booked for these dates, I would also see those reservations appear here. But what this is able to tell me, not only that I've got a group block, but again, it does tell you if there's any wholesaler blocks in place as well. So there's the group that I just created, and I can see the rooms that are remaining in the block as 11. So that information is a really great way to double check to make sure that you have the correct inventory set aside for the group that you just created in the groups module. So once again, you can jump to the inventory calendar. You can hit F12 on your keyboard, and then any date that you wanted to see inventory detail, you just click on the date header. So let me close the inventory calendar. I'm going to go back to my groups module inside the operations menu here. So I've created the group. I can see the Smith-Jones wedding group listed in my list of active groups here. Now I can either double click on the group, or I can select the open button on the right-hand side to pick up where I left off. So this is just going to open up that group wizard once again. Of course, all of my steps 1, 2, and 3 are already completed. Steps 4 through 8 are optional, but they do give you the option to enhance or add further management to the group itself. So with the guest services step number 4, this is where I can include guest services for the benefit of the group itself. Now, you will need to create guest services in advance. And if you'd like to learn more about guest services, our previous month, last month in May, we did a great overview of the guest services, packages, inclusions, modules as well. So you can check out that previous webinar for how to create a guest service. Here, we've got a variety of guest services that are already created for us. So I could add in certain things like include valet parking for the group. I would select the service and use the add button. You can even customize the price of the service. If the service already has a price, like this one is $20 for valet parking, you can give a negotiated or discounted rate for the group guests. So I might offer this for $15 instead of $20. Any guest services that you add or modify, you need to select Post at the bottom of the screen in order to update the database for that guest service. Another feature that you can use within the group wizard is the ability to set up a rooming list. Rooming list is going to allow you to enter in guest first name and last name and reserve rooms as part of the group block without having to create individual reservations. So this might be used, for example, if I want to make sure that that EKS, the Executive King Suite, is going to be booked for the bride. I'm going to go ahead and make a reservation for her by entering in her name, first name and last name into the appropriate fields. With a rooming list, you can also ensure that you are booking the correct dates and length of stay, as well as occupancy. So because this is the bride, she may arrive 1 day early and stay 1 day later for a total of 3 nights. So she'll arrive for the pre-arrival, stay through, and then check out 1 day later. Of course, if there's any adults or children in the room, you can enter that information. You can even assign a specific room number from a list of available room numbers based off of this room type category. So I'm going to go ahead and select one of our higher floor rooms for this guest. Now, if you also want this guest, you'll notice here that they automatically have the group rate, the negotiated group rate attached, and the room and tax charges are going to go to folio 1. That's indicated with the F number column at the very end. Now, if you've added any guest services on the previous step number 4, you can also enable or automatically add those guest services to this particular guest in the rooming list just by double clicking on the guest service checkbox there. So this ensures that this guest is going to be charged the group rate, the negotiated group rate. The charges are going to folio number 1, and they will also receive that valet parking at the discounted price of $15. Now, because the guest is going to be booking outside of the block, they are booking 1 day before and staying 1 day later, I'm going to enable overbooking. When you do that in the group wizard, it is going to overbook the block, not the actual hotel inventory. So by doing enable overbooking, I will select post, and that will now guarantee that reservation for this guest arriving 1 day early and staying through a total of 3 nights, checking out on the 18th. So I know that this is now a guaranteed reservation because I now have a res ID or confirmation number assigned for this guest. Now, with reservations here in the rooming list, you can manage the reservation directly inside this Rate Wizard module. You can click on Change Res to make any changes if needed. You can also add additional notes. These will appear as additional reservation notes on file for this guest. You can also add in any shared guests. So because there are 2 adults registered to this room, I might want to register the second adult's name. I can double click on this double-headed icon column. That's going to show me the guests that are already registered to the room. Of course, it is the primary guest. And it does allow me to also insert another guest. And add that information there. Perfect. Now, of course, when it comes to the arrival and departure days, I can do a group check-in and a group checkout, but those are grayed out for me while those dates have not yet arrived. So on the date of arrival for this group, I would be able to do a group check-in and a group checkout. And lastly, I can also track any notes internally regarding this group. So these notes do not appear on any guest documentation. The guests themselves would not see this information. This is for internal use only, so that you can communicate with other sales managers or group managers that may be overseeing this group itself. So now I've gone ahead and I've created the group. We've looked at some of the other optional steps available for this group as well. Now, I just want to show you how a front desk agent would be able to go through and make a reservation for this group. We'll just do that as a quick demonstration, and then we'll come back and see some more information about creating and managing the billing side of groups. So to create a group reservation for any of the groups that are created inside the database, you would start with creating a new res. And the first thing that you would want to do is define your guests. So the guests will typically tell you when they want to arrive and depart. So because I know that that group block for the wedding is going to be arriving on the 16th, I'll jump to the 16th and make sure that the client type is defined as group. Now, RoomKey is going to do a quick search to see any groups that are active during these arrival and departure days. And it's going to show me that group in the drop-down menu next to the client type. So if there's any other groups that are active during those dates, I would be able to select the appropriate group from this drop-down menu, but we just have the one wedding group, so that's automatically selected for me. Now, when I refresh the calendar, this is now going to update and show me how many rooms are available in the block. So this is not the inventory for the hotel. This is just showing me the inventory for the group block itself. If you need to know how many rooms are available in the hotel, you can select the details button, and this will show you the inventory details for the general inventory. This is just going to open up as a pop-up on screen. There we go. So for the inventory details, this is now going to show me the inventory that remains inside the hotel itself. So if this guest wanted to arrive one day before, maybe arrive on June 15th, or sorry, let me make sure I'm looking at the correct inventory here. This should be showing me my inventory for July, not June. I might just have to refresh that information here. There we go. So I just wanted to update that information, making sure that it shows me the inventory that is available outside of the group block for those days. So I can see that if the guest wants to arrive one day before on July 15th and stay through to Sunday and check out on the following Monday, they would have rooms available outside of the group block. So I'm just going to close that inventory calendar. Of course, I can select from either of these room types, make sure that the room is available. And here, whenever I'm selecting the rate, you'll notice that I only have the option of selecting the group rate. And if you've attached any packages to the group client type, those will also show up as available. But typically you would simply see your group rate. You'll notice that I do not see any rate available for best available or any AAA or any discount rates there. So I'm going to go ahead and select the group rate, book that room, and I can now proceed with entering in my contact information. I'm just going to do a search here for an existing profile and attach that information. Great. And we'll use that selected card there. Perfect. So I can make the reservation and guarantee that for the guest by selecting OK. Now, when a group reservation is made, in RoomKey, it's going to display the name of the group within the group tour section. So I can see here that this reservation, even though this is a returning guest, they are returning as part of a group. And any notes on file for the group are noted here as well. So I can see that the guest is paying for their own room and tax charges. That's going to be paid using their credit card on file. Now I can also manage this information from my groups module here. If I open up Smith Jones Wedding, this is just going to open up on screen once again. I can take a look at the rooming list, and it will reflect not only the bride's room that I booked originally, but it will now show any other reservations that have been made. So I can now see David Smith's reservation appearing here on the rooming list. Just like with Jessica Smith, I do have the option to make changes to the reservation, add a note or a new reservation note. I can even assign rooms from this rooming list as well. Now, a couple of things that we haven't seen yet is the billing methods for the groups. We've been talking about individual billing right now. So the next thing I wanted to show you was this executive meeting group. I'm going to open up this group, and you can see already that there is a city account attached or associated with this group. This is just going to open up. And if I go to the contact and billing info, this is where the billing is set up slightly different from the example we started with. In this case, this group, their room and tax is actually going to be paid on or direct billed to a city ledger account. So when room and tax charges are posted while the guests are in-house, those charges are going to be posted to Folio 8. That indicates that the guest is not paying for them, but some other third party is paying for it. So the room and tax is held on Folio 8 until the guest checks out. When the guest checks out, those charges are automatically transferred to this city ledger account, whatever is defined in this bill to field. So when you're setting up direct billing for a group, you will often assign it to an existing city ledger account, but you do have the ability to create a new account at this time as well. So if you wanted to create a brand new city ledger account for the purpose of this individual group, you can select create new account. You can give it its own city ledger name. You can call it ABC Executive Meeting Billing, and you can also define its credit limit. If you already have an account set up, you can use the ellipsis button, the three little dots here, to select from a list of existing city ledger accounts. So when you're setting up city ledger billing, this is the only difference that you would make. You'll notice that the general information remains pretty straightforward for this group. Just hit cancel here. You would also be able to see that the rates are set up in just the exact same way that we set up our Smith-Jones wedding group, where we defined the group rate and used the override attached rates to customize it for the group. And the block is also set up the exact same way, where we've used rooms in the block column to allocate rooms for this group itself. Neat. So that is an example of a city ledger billing. And I'm going to close the group wizard and go to another group here I have for Appleton Davis. Now this wedding group is a little bit different. It's using house account billing instead of city ledger or individual booking. So for this wedding group, we've said that the guests themselves will still pay their own room and tax charges, but we have specific guests that are part of the wedding party where their room and tax is going to go to a house account. Now, house accounts are set up in advance, so they usually have a unique numbering system. For this database, where the room numbers are 3 digits, the house account room numbers are 4 digits. So the house account that is used for this group is called 9002. So on the contact and billing info, I've indicated that the guest room and tax charges are going to folio number 1, because that is primarily what the wedding group guests are going to be paying their own room and tax charges. When it comes to the routing and deposit tab, though, here is where I've added in the house account. I selected add house account, and I can see that the house account has been added for me with the room number 9002. Now, I've also indicated that room and tax charges are going to go to this account. And the other thing that I can do once I have a house account, if the group is going to be providing a check for room and tax in advance of their arrival, I can record that as a deposit for those room and tax charges. So here I can select deposit, and I can actually collect a deposit on behalf of the group itself. So I'm just going to collect a check here for $500. So that has now been attributed to this house account 9002, which is where room and tax charges are going for the specific guests. Now, the way that we would define this split, as you'll recall here on the general tab, that some guests are paying their own room and tax charges, but wedding party guests are paid going to the house account. The way that we define that split is actually on the rooming list. Here on the rooming list, it will show a list of all the reservations so far created for the group. And on the right-hand side, this final column where it says F number, that indicates the folio number. So for the guest, Lisa Appleton, her room and tax charges are going to folio 8, and they're going to go to that house account grouped all together. For a regular guest that might be reserving here, let's make a reservation for another guest, you'll notice that it automatically defaults to folio number 1. If I make another reservation, again, it does default to folio number 1, but you can change this in the F number column and change it to folio number 8. So even though I've made 2 new reservations for Emily Appleton and Kyle Jones will be paying his own room and tax charges on folio number 1, whereas both Emily and Lisa Appleton are going to be having their room charges routed to folio 8, and those charges will be paid using the house account billing. So that F number column can be used to kind of customize how that billing is split up if you have multiple methods of billing within one group. Now, I know that we are coming up to the end of our overview for today. I will be including some supplementary videos whenever this video is made available on our support website. I'm just going to go ahead and close down our group master here and take a look at some of the questions available for our open Q&A session there. So it looks like Will has been diligently answering all of the questions in the question and answer section. I do have an open question from Christina Barnes just asking about mobile checkout. And it looks like some of those questions might be more focused towards mobile check-in and check-out the module itself. Christina has asked regarding the restrictions or exclusion rules with regards to mobile checkout emails, and asking if routing in a group will ensure that they do not receive a mobile checkout email. So that one I might have to just define a little bit better outside of this presentation, but Christina, I will get back to you about that specific question, just because it does kind of blend into more of the mobile checkout side of things. I can answer that outside of this presentation today. So with that, I do apologize for some of the technical issues we've experienced today, but I do strongly appreciate everyone participating with today's Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording for today so that we can wrap up today's meeting.